everybody. Good evening, everybody. My name is Tobin. I'll be the MC for this evening. Thank you for joining us. This is the Sioux Climate Hub's seminar series number 12, Climate Change, How to Engage the Next Generation. Okay. All right, before we begin, the Sioux Climate Hub, we at the Sioux Climate Hub would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory, and the land on which we gather and work is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, specifically the Garden River and Batchewana First Nations, as well as Métis people. Okay, you'll have to bear with me this evening. I'm not a pro at this yet, but I'll get there. Okay, so this presentation is put on by the Sioux Climate Hub. The Sioux Climate Hub is a group of concerned citizens advancing climate change mitigation and adaptation to align Sault Ste. Marie with scientific, aspirational, and global targets for greenhouse gas reduction through education, engagement, and other activities. The Sioux Climate Hub is part of the Climate Reality Project Canada, which in turn is a part of the International Climate Reality Project, which has projects in various countries across the world. Okay, at the Sioux Climate Hub, we act as a catalyst for diverse climate actions. For diverse climate actions in the Sioux area. We're informed by global trends and national policy, and we focus on issues and actions specifically relevant to local citizens. Now, if anyone's interested, we always are looking for new members and enthusiastic people to support us. You can reach us at Facebook at facebook.com/SiouxClimateHub and by email siouxclimatehub@gmail.com. Perhaps a little later, I'll throw those into the chat just in case anyone wants to jot that down. So currently, because of COVID, our focus is on our work is mostly done through Facebook and the webinar series. Post-COVID, we're looking to expand our public outreach through face-to-face events and that sort of things. There are no membership fees, so for anyone who's interested, please reach out because we'd love to have you and we'd love to hear your ideas. Okay. Well, I'm excited about tonight's presentation, which is especially important to me and likely to some of you. As a parent, your gut instinct is to shield your children from danger, trouble, and emotional distress. But at the same time, this needs to be balanced with their need to grow, with their need to interact with the world, and to learn truth. I first met Jason when our children were quite young at a park in the summer. I didn't know it then, but he would be my son's kindergarten teacher that fall. We had a short discussion about how children impress us so much with their ability to learn quickly and take on challenging tasks. As I remember, we both agreed children need challenges and to take managed risks, and that we should guide them in doing so. I really like this guy, I thought. So fast forward to early 2021, about 8 years. Like many of you, I think a lot about climate change and the intertwined ecological crises. And I want to find productive ways to engage my children without scaring them senseless. When I saw David Attenborough's A Life on This Planet, and that's a brilliant film.
Are they going to be in this?
I'm sure.
It's a brilliant film if you haven't seen it. I thought viewing this would be a good way to prompt more conversation at home, and I asked my son to watch it with me. And he said, I've already seen it in Mr. Chenier's grade 6 class. And more than that, my son could articulate his thoughts and feelings about the crisis facing all of us. So no extra credit projects for him that night. Quietly teaching his class, Jason has not only raised the subject of the climate crisis, but nurtured thinking around it and helped students reach their own conclusions. What's more, he's helped to foster young voices that we need so desperately to lead the way and to get things done. Which brings me to our second presenter, Marika. A former student of Jason's, I am told, and now I know for myself, having listened to the CBC interview this morning, she is passionate about actions and solutions to address the ecological crises we face. What's more, not only does she talk the talk, her and her family walk the walk, which I can't wait to learn more about. It's my pleasure to introduce FH Clerg French immersion teacher, Jason Chenier, and grade 7 student, Marijke DeGeus, who will present tonight's webinar, Climate Change, How to Engage the Next Generation. Jason and Marika, I hand things over to you.
Woo, 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 woo. Thank you for such a lovely introduction, Tobin. It's funny that you remember the details of our conversation about, I don't know, 10 years ago, when we were in that park. I remember that, that event vividly as well.
Like it was yesterday.
Yeah, it's strange. I actually can remember it vividly. Let me introduce Marika here. So this is Marijke DeGeus. She's my, she's the co-presenter here this evening. Marika, can you turn on your camera and say hi to everybody? I'm going to share my screen in the process here. Oh,
isn't my camera on? It says my camera's on.
There you go. We can see you.
Okay.
You would like to say hi?
Hi.
All right. So Marika and I have, over the last little while, prepared a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation for Sioux Climate Hub that we have mindfully put together. So let me share my screen with everybody. And here's slide number 1. Forgive me if I'm making some errors along the way here. And how do I click on to the next slide? Can anybody direct me to do that?
I think you press the space button.
Okay. So our topic is to how to effectively engage the next generation in climate change. So as you've heard, I am a, none of these options are working for me to.
Try a down arrow or next page.
I've tried the down arrow. I've tried that. I've tried, all my arrows are giving me the blank. Remote control.
Jason, are you using a mouse?
I am not.
Are you using the hand pad?
I have the arrows on the right and none of them are working to switch the slide.
Oh, okay.
I could stop and share it individually. Yeah, space stars. Anything that I click is causing. Ah, voila. Is this slide number 3, Marika, or is this slide number 2? Am I in the right one?
This is slide number 2. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So we wanted to make it clear to everybody tonight that we are not climate change experts. We're not scientists. We're not researchers. I would even go so far as to say the lion's share of the people that are in the meeting tonight probably know more specifics about climate change than we may even know, even in our, relatively responsible and our ecologically responsible lifestyles that we live. But who we are, I'm a grade 6 teacher at a French immersion school in Sault Ste. Marie here at FH Clerg. I am very passionate about teaching. I actively pursued it while I was in another career. And it was honestly simply to change the world. You can imagine my interview responses. It's to change the world. I wasn't happy with the way people were treating the environment and treating one another. So I figured I better go do something about it. So I left a career as a therapist and I pursued a career as a teacher. And here I am.
I am a 12-year-old student and my family had made an effort to be environmentally responsible. And I'm also part of the Youth Algoma Poultry Association, which taught me how to raise poultry and how to live on a farm out here.
Okay, so how we ended up here, how everything came to be that we would be sitting in front of all of you to be able to share this message about how to engage the next generation. And it was during this process that I came to realize something that I hadn't realized in my entire career from teaching. So there was an event that had taken place when I was still a therapist and living in Michigan. I was leaving a grocery store one day and I was following a car moving towards a shopping mall. We had turned left and I watched this car open its window and it launched out of its window its dinner, you know, those clamshell packages. They threw it out the window. And it was in that moment where I said, enough, this is enough. You know, the way people are treating the environment. And I was living in Michigan too. And it was, it's not the most, you know, I was the only person on my street that recycled, put it that way. And I figured I needed to really make an effort to go and make a change. I had to be part of the change because it had been bothering me for a long time, the way I was watching people around me, A, treat each other, but B, treat the environment. So that would involve me leaving a reputable outpatient orthopedic physical therapy company in Grand Rapids as a director. I used to be the director of sports medicine there. And to pursue a career as a teacher, and with the ultimate goal of making a change. So then I would move back to Sault Ste. Marie. I would go to Teachers College up in Thunder Bay. I began my career as a kindergarten teacher, which I taught Marika's younger sister, Sophia. And even then, as a kindergarten teacher, I was trying to get the kids to critically think, but also to learn to treat each other kindly and to treat the environment kindly, and the importance of doing that. I would end up meeting Marika's family, and I really enjoyed how they lived so ethically, even against the grain. When the dominant culture around them was doing what they were doing, they still walked the walk and talked the talk so beautifully. And I really respected who they were. Fast forward a number of years, I would get the opportunity to teach the older DeGeus sister, Marika. She would walk into my classroom in autumn 2021, and I already knew some about her and her family, but she walked in as a shy girl. And through her year as a grade 6 student in my class, she grew leaps and bounds in terms of a student and her ability to voice her convictions. She emerged as a leader in the classroom, a very clear leader in the classroom, but her ability to communicate the value of living responsibly. And she often shared her wisdom with the classroom, and she made an impact on the culture of the class. And so that's how and why, when Tobin had asked me to do this conversation tonight, this chat tonight, Marika was an immediate connection for me. And I thought, you know, the voice of a child is far more potent, far more powerful than the voices of adults. And so she was the natural selection. So I contacted Marika, spoke to her parents, and they were all in. And so here we are tonight, preparing. It's like the full circle of a dream about becoming a teacher and the reason I would become a teacher. And it would bring us to this point now. It's such a lovely story for me personally, and it's a feel-good story because it's a happy ending. And so that's how I ended up here tonight. Marika?
Our family used to live in the Sioux, and we always had conversations about moving to a farm in Echo Bay. And we always wanted to grow our own food and manage a forest. But in the beginning, we had no idea how to do any of this, but we soon realized that we could do it. And it's just like learning to make a change with climate change. Anyone can learn how to make a change if they want to.
Beautiful, Marika. Okay, so Marika, and when we were preparing our notes, we were trying to really hit on the points about what were the most effective points that would cause the next generation to be genuinely engaged in the issue of climate change. And aside from just hearing information, what was effective in making the change itself? You know, with kids to walk away with tools that they could have in order to make a change and be convicted enough that they would want to make a change. And so she and I created our separate lists, and when we brought them together, interestingly, they would be awfully similar, which is funny because she and I have walked through an academic year together, And so from the teacher's perspective, these were important to me, but also from a student perspective, it was in Marika's opinion as well that these were also the points that that were effective through the academic year. And so point number one, blunt with facts. You know, we have this tendency to protect our children, like Tobin had said at the beginning. I was smiling to myself because I thought that's funny, because that's a point in what we'd like to share. That we have this tendency to protect kids, to soften everything for them so that they don't experience any discomfort. And while that's our natural tendency as their teachers, parents, adults around them, but there's a certain amount of stress, obviously, that's necessary for growth. And what we found is that the more blunt that I was with the facts about how severe the state was of the earth, the more shocking it was, which of course seemed to shake awake the students, helped them to realize this, you know, it communicated the severity of the situation. Number two was to inform them. It is surprising, you know, we so often say that why aren't people making better decisions environmentally than what they are? And I think that largely people don't know, because, you know, I want to believe that people are inherently good and that we inherently want to make the right choices. But I think oftentimes people just don't realize what those choices are, or their role and how we've come to this sad state of affairs. So informing the population, I think, is the second point, or it is the second point. Number three is a culture of responsible behavior. We'll talk about more each one of these points more in their individual slides, but I have found as a teacher that when you create a culture in a classroom, that becomes the acceptable behavior. So that was a third point. And then finally, when you create an emotional connection between children and, in this case, the environment or the individual species or the animal or whatever it is, then it seems to cause or stir something in them to wake them up and for them to actually really want to make a difference. Okay, so blunt with the facts. So as we had indicated here, is there a way, can somebody, oh, they're perfect. As we had indicated, being blunt with the facts about the current state of affairs is something that causes people's eyes to open, their jaws to drop, and helps them to realize how grave the situation is. And the response from students when they realize how severe something is, I would suspect, just like any other group of people, it causes people to respond in an emotional fashion. Marika, Mike, I have a question for you in that. So you've had other teachers that have responded differently or who have taught differently, and perhaps were not quite so blunt. How have you noticed a difference between how students would respond in years prior, as opposed to when they would come to my class and I would be really honest about the state of the earth?
It's completely different. And I think because once they realize the truth, like how bad the situation really is, then they realize that they had a part in making it worse. And I think that impacts them.
Did you notice that, and this isn't a leading question, this is a genuine question, that did you notice in years prior that students did make life changes, and as compared to in our class, did you happen to notice if kids made any changes in their behavior?
I think they were aware, like the teachers were telling them about climate change, but I don't think they really did anything unless their family was already doing something.
Mm-hmm. So as we indicated before, our second point that we had come together with is that in informing children about the types of behaviors or the impact of what they would do on a daily basis was eye-opening. You know, people are relatively mindful. They're not so mindful about what things that they're purchasing. And when we purchase them, what then happens? You know, when we take our recycling, you know, we think we're doing a good job by recycling, we launch our recycling in the recycle bin, but when we realize that, you know, you need to recycle a very specific way in order for recycling to actually be recycled, that requires a certain amount of awareness, a certain amount of understanding. You know, just as simple as, you know, when you take your milk jug, if you don't cut out that plastic piece in the middle, then they don't recycle your milk jug. But to inform the population, so that's so the point about informing the students about what their role is, what we can do to make it better is a necessary piece here. I have to apologize here. My slides are, I don't know which number slide we are on here. So again, Marika, yeah, go ahead. So we're on number what, 5?
Yeah.
Okay, number 5.
Oh, sorry, number 5.
Okay, so I have a question for, my next question for you here, Marika, is this number 5 or is this number 6 that we're on right now?
We're on number 6, actually. I'm sorry.
Number 6, that's okay. So when students, my question for you, Marika, is so from my perspective, when I'm standing and informing students in the way that I have, the way that I chose to inform, when students realize their own personal role in, or how they are personally implicated in the state of the environment, what were your observations or in terms of their responses? You know, when they realize, okay, I have a role in this.
We used to do this thing in Mr. Chenier's class where we'd share news that we'd found out in the mornings. And once the kids in the class were aware and they had been properly informed, they were going more towards environmental news. And so when we did those news, it'd be more environmental news.
Yeah, and of course, as a teacher, I loved it, right? So I started realizing, okay, students, you know, it became the culture in our class that we would look up news, but the news that people would be inclined to go look for would be environmentally related. And of course, my response to that, I was so happy to see that people were becoming convicted, that students were becoming convicted about in the environment, as opposed to sharing news about video games or sharing news about, you know, whatever, you know, that they would be coming back with news about the environment. Yeah, okay, so. Okay, the third point is to create a culture of responsible decision-making. So one of the things that I've learned over the years as a teacher is that whatever you make as an expectation of behavior, that becomes how children behave. And you would be, I think people would be shocked to see or to realize how true that actually is. You know, if in my kindergarten class, there was an expectation, the culture is that we were going to be relatively calm and relatively quiet so that the classroom could be a productive learning environment. And it was that way. And of course, people would walk by in different classrooms would be behaving differently. And then they'd come into my classroom, it would be relatively calm. And that was just the expectation. One of the examples that we had thought of that illustrates this point, that people just respond however the culture is determined for them, is this idea during COVID, when if the decision was left up to individual people to wear masks during COVID, we'd only have a certain number of people who would choose to wear those masks. But when the government creates an expectation of responsible behavior, you know, the expectation is that you will wear masks at school. We will wear masks. Well, what do we see when we go out? everybody is wearing a mask, because the culture, the expectation is this. And so when you create a culture of responsible decisions, people will make them. And I think Marika's life at home is a perfect example of that, about how her parents have created that culture. So you in your life, Marika, what are the differences you see between your life and then the life of the students that are around you because of the culture that was created for you?
So for example, when I go to school, my lunch is in reusable stainless steel containers, and in my lunch, we usually eat the leftovers that we had from the previous supper. So almost nothing goes to waste. Another example of that could be when we go grocery shopping for something that we need. We always bring our reusable bags. It's a routine. And some of other people I've seen, they just buy whatever they think will make their life better. Like, they don't seem to think about what the impact will be as long as it makes their life better.
Mm-hmm.
And
do those differences bug you? Do you have any, like, are you bothered by the fact that your family has moved out to Echo Bay as opposed to being in town, or that you have different lunches than other people, or that your habits are different than others? Is there any discomfort in that?
Nope. I like the way we live.
Yeah, and I remember there's this wonderful moment in teaching Marika when Marika's family moved out to Echo Bay to work on a farm, to tap the trees, to grow their chickens, to produce their own eggs. I asked Marika, "Are you upset that your parents chose to move out to Echo Bay?" And what was your response, Marika?
I think it was, "Monsieur, this is the best thing we've ever done."
That is exactly what you had said. And I think the point that your parents, or that Marika's parents, had created the culture of responsible living equaling a happy life. I think that their family is, on a small scale, is a perfect model of what could occur on a larger scale. And I think that beautifully demonstrates the value of creating a culture of responsible decision making. In grade 6 last year, and this was the first year I had done this, in our electricity unit, we examined the way people used to live in terms of electricity, how prior to electricity, this was the type of behavior that people exhibited. So they used natural sunlight, they walked instead of drove their cars. And then that evolved to what is it that we do today, and we examined the differences. Well, we created this competition in the class where we also then identified all the different ways, or the students identified all the different ways that they could change their lives a little bit in order to consume less energy. And so they came up with this beautiful list, and then I created a competition around it. And then for 1 week, and I don't know if you remember Ben doing this, Tobin, but for 1 week, the students were to go home and they were to make a check mark beside every adjustment in their behavior. So what were some of the examples, Marika? Do you remember some of the examples we had in that competition?
Taking less showers, or less long showers. And I think another one was going outside for at least half an hour.
Instead of playing video games?
Yeah, instead of playing video games.
Yeah, and another, I remember there were kids that were going to ride their bicycles or walk, as opposed to just asking their parents to drive them around the corner, using natural sunlight instead of like turning on electricity. And the list went on. So we created a competition around it. And of course, we had 100% buy-in because it was a competition, and 11 and 12-year-old kids are what they are. And so they went home and they were so engaged in this competition of making small adjustments in their lives to ultimately consume less energy. And at the end of the competition, we noticed that there were 3 things, Marika? we noticed that 3 things had taken place. Do you remember the list of the 3 things? What was number 1?
Yeah. Number 1 was they were aware of all the little things they could do to help climate change. And the second one was they go home and they try all these things out, and then they realize, oh, it's not that hard. We can actually do this. And then the third one was after the competition's finished, if it wasn't hard for them, then they could keep doing those things. And so it might create a culture for doing those things that we discussed for the competition.
Then it just became a healthy habit. And when as a teacher, we experiment with these different ways, and we were so pleased. I was so pleased to see the result of that electricity unit and the way that it impacted the behavior and the awareness of students. And it turned out beautifully. And then the culture of the class became that students would just turn off the lights and they would open the blinds when they would come into class. And I would hear students say, "Monsieur, the lights don't need to be on right now. We can turn them off and just open the blinds," even in moments where I hadn't realized. And that was a litmus for me to realize that the students had begun to develop healthier habits as a result of the culture that we had created. And I was so happy. I was so happy to see that was as successful as it was. And of course, it's something that I'm going to continue to use as we move forward. So our next slide, create a personal connection. When students hear about news that takes place on the other side of the world, or there's a species involved in that perhaps they've never heard about, and they hear it on the news, like I was saying earlier, that people grow callous to the idea that they just keep hearing things repetitively. I find that there isn't any emotional connection between students and the issues. So it was an observation of mine, and Marika and I have had this conversation, of course, that if you haven't seen the documentary, the David Attenborough documentary that was released about 1.5 years ago, there's a moment in the film where he's talking about obviously climate change, but he's talking about how when the polar ice caps have melted, then the walruses are left in an environment that is unnatural, that historically they're not used to. And it shows this scene where a walrus is falling off a cliff and its body is getting destroyed as it falls. And the emotional response from the students in the classroom was shocking even to me. And what I realized was that the students became emotionally attached to not necessarily the walrus, but to another living thing. And it was in those emotional responses when I realized it would have a larger impact than perhaps news that I would have shared earlier in earlier years, or that they may have seen or heard from the news or their other teachers. And Marika, what were your observations around how students responded to things like the walrus falling off the cliff, or the size of the plastic island in the ocean, or the whale that washed up on shore because it had consumed so much plastic that it died?
If they have the connection, then they're really, really sad if it dies because of the way we are treating the planet, how we're treating them. And when it hits them in the right place, they want to do the right thing.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, it is an authentic. It's funny because as a teacher, I get to experiment with everybody else's children, but ultimately, it's I organically discovered all the points that we're talking about tonight. They were through experience, and the kids were genuinely emotional. You know, I've seen students respond emotionally to some of the lessons where we've been blunt with the facts, where we've created an emotional connection between them and what it is that's taking place. And the response is shocking, and I'm so pleased. But it does require some level of connection between the student and the issue, because otherwise it just becomes something that we hear, they become callous to it and they just ignore it. Marika, when we walk away from this presentation this evening, what is like a goal or something that you hope occurs as a result of what it is that we're sharing with everybody tonight?
I hope that the young people and the children will be informed enough to be able to ask questions, and then they can learn how to make small differences, because the small differences make a big impact. Another example of that is COVID. If everybody wears a mask, and that one simple action of wearing a mask helps so much. And the climate change is almost the same thing. If everybody does something little, it'll have a really big impact.
Yeah, and when Marika and we were putting the finishing touches on our presentation tonight for fun, we just tried one example of a small change. We were talking about what is a small change that people can make, and Marika said, why doesn't everybody just get a water bottle that you can reuse all the time? And so for fun, I looked up online and I found, it was my first search, so you don't have to go far to find this information. In our first search in 2018, there were 481.6 billion plastic water bottles thrown in the garbage in the world in 2018. And a small adjustment, such as going to buy a reusable water bottle, results in saving or decreasing 481.6 billion water bottles in 1 year. It's a small change with a massive impact. Small changes make big differences. You're absolutely right, Marika. And just a little icing on the cake, this little happy bumblebee that you see on our slideshow here, that I don't know if you noticed through the presentation, he was sad at the beginning and he's very happy now because people are so much more aware of the message. But this little bumblebee and this flower is something that Marika, when she was in my class, she would write on all her little sticky notes that she would hand in to me. And I appreciated it so much. So I asked her to include her little bumblebee and her flower in our PowerPoint presentation tonight. And that's the information that we have for you. But to recap the 4 points that we figured, or we thought were the most effective pieces to engaging the youth, to get them to understand and to put things in motion, are simply be blunt with the facts. You know, don't try to make it soft, be blunt, because the blunt facts get the type of response that we want. Informing people, awareness is everything. People oftentimes just simply don't know. And I find that in children, they absolutely just simply didn't know. Number 3, create a culture of responsible behavior. If the government can make every single person in this country wear a mask, then they've created a culture. Well, we can create a similar culture. Wouldn't it be nice if the government also forced us to behave in an environmentally responsible fashion? And then the last point that we thought was relevant was to create an emotional connection between the student or the child and the issues that are taking place, because things that are emotional seem to cause us to want to do something about it. Again, that's how I became a teacher. It was my emotional response to watching that person throw that garbage out the window. So thank you, everybody, for listening to our presentation. We hope it was interesting. We hope it was informative in some way. And we hope it results in some positive change that our beautiful Earth can benefit from, and that will benefit from.
Okay, I'm just going to reflect all of the messages I'm reading on the chat, and I want to thank you both for a wonderful presentation. I feel lucky to be the MC tonight because I'm the one who gets to start with the questions, if that's okay with you guys, if you don't mind taking a few questions.
Yep, absolutely.
So in the past, what we've done, people can, in an orderly fashion, either ask their questions by unmuting themselves and asking them directly to the presenters, or they can put their questions into the chat, and I can ask the presenters that way too. So Marika, I'm going to put you on the hot seat first, but I'll give you, if you want, I'll give you time to think about it, your response, and I'll go to Jason because I have 2 questions, okay? So my first question is, Marika, what would you like to see from a group like ours, the Sioux Climate Hub? How do you think a group like ours might be helpful to young people? And I know I'm putting you on the spot, so you can think or you can respond.
I'll think about that for a little bit.
Okay, great. Okay, so Jason, you stressed how important creating a culture of responsible decision-making is. What do you think is the potential for schools to create such cultures?
Great question, and it's funny because there's a point that my girlfriend Jamie said one day when we were having this conversation around making change, and we were talking about how with the traditional or the traditional methods that we all, organizations like yours and all other organizations, with the type of information and awareness that these organizations create, it does result in some change individually. But if we're going to rely on people to make the changes individually, I think we're never going to get far enough. I think that the government forcing or creating, I don't want to use the word force, it has such negative connotations, but creating rules or laws that are responsible and ethical, causing the entire population to adhere to that behavior, I think it's necessary. And that's my opinion, but it makes sense to me. So in that same way, in our school, that's a great question, Tobin, because why don't we then implement this immediately? When the school creates an expectation around the culture of that school, and if that expectation is ethical behavior, environmental behavior, then the culture is created. And we know that when we create a culture that people will follow, we know that. That has been shown so many times in human history and so many different examples. So from a school level, making it a culture, making it the only option. Because, I mean, and ultimately we're not asking people to do anything, we're asking them to make a change, positive change, a good change.
Oh, for certain. And one of the reasons I ask is because my son is still Mr. Turn the Lights Out. That's his job in the house. And from kindergarten, my kids, were very passionate about composting. And I know that's something that happens. So wonderful. Marika, you don't have to have an answer for us, but we'd love to hear from you if you do. Okay, perfect.
So I honestly didn't know about the Sioux Climate Hub before this. So I think if you guys could come to the schools and talk about the Sioux Climate Hub, then the kids are aware, and then the kids will go and tell their parents. And then now the kids and the parents would be aware. And you could also tell them about how they can help with climate change. And I think that's it.
Great answer. Thank you.
That is a great answer.
Okay, so I'll wait for a moment. If anyone wants to ask a question, please go ahead. Otherwise, I'll go to the chat. I believe there's a couple there.
I actually have a question, if that's all right. First of all, awesome presentation, both of you. That was amazing. I'm a teacher candidate at the SING right now and hoping to be an ADSB teacher. So it's really inspiring to watch the work you're doing and just awesome advocacy and everything. I had a question for Jason, just in surrounding how you've been talking about creating that personal connection. There's obviously a bit of a disassociation to the environment. And I was just curious what role you think having, focusing on a local scale, local scale issues and a place-based environmental education, like, you know, the Sioux area, instead of like that disassociation from these big problems happening all over. If you had any thoughts about that.
Can you, I'm trying in my head to try to pinpoint your question and I'm having a hard time finding it.
Sorry, just
Sorry.
if you think that there would be an impact in focusing on local scale issues, like issues happening like about the environment in the Sioux
Yeah.
area, rather than just like these large scale issues.
Yeah, and interestingly, as you go to teach, in the event that you should ever teach in grade 6, biodiversity is part of our science unit. And one of the things we looked at this year was invasive species. So in the curricular document, it talks about what types of things are taking place locally. So we had the luxury of having the invasive species come to do a presentation, and we also have our government forestry buildings here, right? So we have the luxury, I have the luxury of teaching many of their kids. And so we have those connections in the community where the experts come and speak to the classrooms. I do for sure think that the local issues, I believe, I understand your question now, the local issues would, in my opinion, help the students to see the relevance of it. Because when it's your own forest, you have a connection. We all have a connection to our own forest. And I think that, again, this awareness, I think when people are outside, and I used to bring my kindergarten class outside every single day, when those kids have a personal connection to that forest that is around them, to the point where, you know, the kids know the number, my kindergarten class, they would know the number of sugar maples in our forest or the number of birch trees in our forest. But when they know them intimately like that, when they have those relationships with their environment around them, then they become connected to it, and they really genuinely do become connected to it. Again, it's a culture, right? It's the culture of the classroom. So yes, great point. The idea that when we focus on our own local environment, our own local forest, that is a great method to increase that personal, intimate connection between the student and the environment as a whole.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, we'll just wait one more moment if anyone wants to voice any questions, and then we'll head to the questions in the chat. Okay, so there's a question here. First, it says, thanks so much. Question is, if we scale up from the class to the school board, is the school board engaged on the same issues? Are there gaps in the board's engagement?
That's a hot question.
I thought it might be.
That is a very hot question. I have to, I'm always honest, and I will say that I personally don't know, and this doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I just don't know about it. I don't know of any environmental initiatives that are taking place on a board level. Though I mean, the school board is full of former teachers that are now in administrative positions who used to fill the classrooms as classroom teachers. And of course, as our curriculum are developed, all of the science curriculum along the way from kindergarten all the way at least to grade 8, and that's what I'm familiar with, they all have an environmental responsibility piece to it. So while I'm not certain necessarily about the issue or the initiatives that are taking place on a school board level, I am very comfortable in saying that I'm certain the school board would be really supportive of the curriculum, and the curriculum does have elements at every single level where we are to teach students to be good stewards of the environment. So while I don't, again, directly to the school board, I'm unaware, but the province of Ontario has included an element of stewardship at all levels for students. Wow, that is a hot question.
Okay, I saw a hand raised. If someone wants to ask their question, go ahead.
Hi, I'm one of Monsieur Chenier's students from the grade 6 class. I had a question for Marika. Do you think it's easier to live an environmentally responsible life, or is it like a routine now, or did you have to get into the habit of doing it, or was it just something that your family wanted to do and it was easy to change into an environmentally friendly life?
That's a good question. I guess, I mean, it's easy to be informed, like it's easy to be able to know how to be environmentally friendly. But then after you're informed, I guess if you really wanted to do it, then it's not that hard at all. Like, you just have to develop a routine, and
Yeah,
then
thank
it
you.
kind of goes from there.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Piper.
Merci, monsieur.
Oh, it looks like we may have a question from the Honorable Terry Sheehan.
Well, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay. Je m'appelle Terry Sheehan. Je suis député de Sault-Sainte-Marie. Et my question is to the students online, and very, very informative dialogue. And thank you to your teachers and the teachers and everyone online. What is it? And it's an open-ended question. What is it that the federal government could do, Justin Trudeau, myself, to better, fight climate change? I can talk about some of the things we have done. We have taken some bold actions that I am proud of, both in small ways and big ways. And I think about the Algoma Steel investment that we did that's going to anchor Algoma Steel for generations to come, so that students like yourself could work there if they choose to. But it's also going to take about 950,000 cars off the road. We know that that is absolutely important. There's so many other things that we could do, big or small. We're doing a plastic ban, single-use plastic ban. But particularly, if you had a message to the Prime Minister, and I do speak with him frequently, what would it be, and what things can I convey back to the Prime Minister and to the Liberals that we should be doing?
I'm going to wait for Marika to see if she would like to ask a or to comment on that. I would love to. I would love to respond to that, but please, Marika.
Jason, you know what? Marika, go first, and you second, and then I heard a young other voice that wasn't there. So again, and truly, thank you for inviting me to this.
I'm not really sure. Maybe if Mr. Chenier could go first, I could think about it for a little.
No problem. Mr. Sheehan, thank you very, very much for your efforts in French, first of all. Thank you for being interactive with a grassroots organization like the Sioux Climate Hub. I think that's awesome. I'm impressed by your willingness to be vulnerable in this moment. I think it's awesome. And I'm thoroughly pleased with the fact that you are asking this question to this organization, to kids, that you're actively involved in this initiative. I'm so very pleased to hear that. My initial response is that government, it seems like you guys have to balance what is valuable to your citizens as a whole, as well as making responsible decisions that are oftentimes, I'm sure, are not popular. But the environment is something that in the world, the earth is something that we just simply cannot compromise. I mean, there is no dollar value that can be put on losing species. I don't know if you've seen that documentary from David Attenborough, but the state of affairs is extremely severe. for the earth. Like, it is far worse than 99.9% of the population realizes. And we must, absolutely must, respond in a way where our changes are aggressive. It is a necessity, because Marika's poor generation, they won't have healthy drinking water and clean air to breathe. But ultimately, I would say that if we examine the world's most responsible countries and their most responsible practices, why wouldn't we model ourselves after that? You know, why would we model ourselves in Canada? We take pride in being one of the best nations to live in the world. But we have some embarrassing practices on a national level in terms of the environment. But if we can follow, or not even follow, but if we can examine the best models in the world, Scandinavian countries, they have beautiful environmental models on a national scale. But if we can at least meet those and perhaps even make them better, you know, we live in a country where we have the brain power, we have the money, we have the resources available to us. We have a relatively small population for the size of our country. We don't have any good reasons why we're not leading the world in our environmental practices, when sadly we aren't. But that would be my answer, is to follow the best model. So the next time you're talking to Justin, please let him know that I said so. Respectfully. I know he's got a hard job, but that would be my response to that. Let's not be shy. Let's not try to do what is minimal. Let's try to do the most we possibly can, because without it, we have nothing, absolutely nothing. Then the money that we're concerned about making or keeping in Canadians' pockets will be all for naught.
Merci beaucoup.
Yeah, ça me fait plaisir.
My grandparents own an electrical vehicle, and they still can't get from Owen Sound to the Sioux because there's not charging stations for the electrical vehicle. And so I think maybe if you could maybe try and make it easier for people to be able to change how they live. And I think that's all I have to say on that. Thank you for the question.
That is just tremendously important, and I certainly will bring that up. And we have done and put recently a bunch of electrical charging stations here in the Sioux, whether it's down at the Sioux Canal. You know, JJ Hilsinger, who I used to work for up at the water tower, has some. There are a number of them. But to your point, my friend, you're absolutely right. We need more of them, and we need to continue to roll them out. And we have a mandate that, you know, by I think it's 2035, that all vehicles in Canada being purchased will be electrical. So we need the infrastructure in place to be able to make that happen expeditiously. And you know, again, thank you very much. I'm not here to talk about myself. I'm here to listen. And thank you so much for all input and all questions, and I look forward to coming back and checking in with all of you again. So merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sheehan. That's great.
Hi there. Could I ask I'll make a comment and ask a question? It's Dave Pearson here. Jason and Marika, thanks for a wonderful presentation and a very interesting initiative. And I wonder whether a project at the school would be interesting. For example, planting milkweed to help the eastern monarch butterfly. The western monarch butterfly, we just heard today, is recovering quite well, but not the eastern. And I think planting milkweed or Joe Pye weed, which is a plant that people know around here and don't have to buy from a market garden, that would be an interesting project. And you could spin that off from understanding the migration of the monarch butterfly and how vulnerable it is to bees. One of the problems that pollinators like bees are having is that people are using insecticides, and insecticides don't just kill the ticks or whatever it is that might be making people uncomfortable, but is also killing the bees. I've talked to people around here who have beehives in order to make honey, and the bees are just not as healthy as they used to be, not as numerous as they used to be, because of insecticides that people are using without even thinking what the problems are. I think a project like that, which would catch the eyes of newspapers, and it would motivate other students in the school, and I think could be a project that you could speak about. You spoke beautifully on CBC this morning, Marika. Boy, that was impressive. And if you could be telling the story of what you're doing for the Eastern monarchs and how important it is for other pollinators like bees, you would be a hit. Don't underestimate the power that a young voice has these days. All power to you, and thanks for a great presentation.
Thank you.
I just wrote down from your question, your comment, I just wrote down that at our staff meetings to talk about those types of things. Again, if we as a school or even school board, but as a school, if we make it the culture in our school to be those types of classrooms, then the students will become those type of people. And we need it. We absolutely need it. That's not even a question, it's a necessity. That is a great comment and question.
Yeah. The other thing that you might do is, if you've got somebody who could be influential on the school board, you might ask them to do an assessment of energy efficiency at the schools. It's there are ways to make homes, but also school buildings and the city buildings as well, more energy efficient, and figure out how much greenhouse gas you'd be saving. Although it depends how the schools are heated, because we've got so much nuclear power supplied in Ontario, and so much hydropower. In fact, our greenhouse gas emissions for most people's power are quite low compared with other provinces in the country. Nevertheless, energy efficiency would be a way that the school board could save money, which appeals to school boards, as well as again, spinning off to the awareness of people in the community. Look at energy efficiency in the arena, or look at the energy efficiency in people's homes. I think that would be another very intriguing project that you might initiate a discussion, and that might turn into a project that you could initiate.
Your question or your comment has me wanting to go straight to the top and go talk to the provincial government about it. Because
don't waste your time. Don't waste your time.
Because ultimately it's funded by them, aren't they?
It is, but do you think you're going to get much of a response from this provincial government? I mean, I don't want to get into politics, but
I think you already did.
Climate change is not high on the agenda for the coming election, believe me.
Okay, so we have a raised hand. So why don't you go ahead if you'd like to ask your question.
Hi, it's me, Piper, again from Mr. Chenier's class. I was a part of it's more of a comment, but I was a part of the biodiversity lesson that Mr. Chenier did with the David Attenborough documentary. Before we did the biodiversity lesson, we there was maybe 14 out of 27 students that would bring a plastic water bottle into the classroom. And I used to be one of them, and Monsieur would point it out to everybody. And then we did the lesson, and everybody, it was such an emotional moment when the seals were falling. That's one of the big moments. The seals were falling. I could say almost the whole class was tearing up because it was such an emotional moment that we're causing that. After the lesson, there was maybe 3 or 4 people that would bring a plastic water bottle. And I think that's such an amazing topic that Mr. Chenier got the chance to teach about, because it made such a big impact on our class. So I'd like to thank Mr. Chenier for that.
Thank you so much, Piper. And I'm really glad to hear that it actually has an impact. That's great. Merci à toi.
Well said. I'll wait for a quick second and then I'll move on to, there's only a few questions in the chat, so we'll probably be wrapping things up in not too long. Any questions? Okay, so Marika, I think this question is for you mostly, but Jason can certainly comment as well, from our very own Ted McPherson. Would it be helpful if younger people could vote? Climate change will affect young people much more than 70+ people like me, but I can vote and young people can't.
I think if young people, well, most young people were well informed and responsible, I think that it may have an impact if we could vote, but they would have to, like I said, be responsible and properly informed.
Wouldn't that be lovely if it was true in the adult population as well?
Okay, so the next question. Okay, so the next question is, based on the fact we are so reliant on the construction industry, are there responsible ways to support both economical / industrial growth and climate change? We're about to go down a path to reduce emissions at our largest employer in Sault Ste. Marie, a very substantial construction project.
To be honest with you, just like Marika and I had started this meeting with, is that we're not the climate change experts. So I'm not equipped to answer that question, to be honest.
Okay, well, I'll be quiet for one more moment to see if there's any further questions. Okay, well, on behalf of the Sioux Climate Hub, I want to thank Jason and Marika for a wonderful presentation. Really, words can't express how thankful we are for you guys coming on today and sharing your thoughts. It's very important to us. Just as a matter of housekeeping, in the chat, I've posted the Sioux Climate Hub email and Facebook link. We do most of our communicating these days through Facebook, but please feel, if you do want to get involved or just check out what's going on, please do visit us at Facebook. We try to have these webinars on a monthly basis. We don't have a date nailed down for February yet or a presenter, but I'm sure that will happen in the not too distant future. So please check us out at the Sioux Climate Hub.
Thank you for the opportunity. And if anyone wanted to start small, they could do refills at the new refillery in the Sioux. It's called Harterra.
Yes, please allow me to put a plug in there too as well. Harterra is a refillery in town. It's new. Interestingly, Marika's mother is the owner and operator of it. and Marika is also an operator of it. But it's an opportunity to decrease the amount of packaging and to, for some people, either begin a more responsible life or even just to help make your efforts to be more ethical and responsible and environmental. Get down there, check out this store, and so that we can keep it around, so we can continue to have awesome opportunities like that to live more ethical, responsible, environmental lifestyles.
Okay, so thanks again for the wonderful presentations. Thanks to everyone for coming out. I also want to mention, this is we have new iterations of the Sioux Climate Hub. We're now on YouTube and Instagram as well, so you can check us out there. Thank you all for attending, and thank you again to Jason and Marika for a great presentation, and I hope everyone has a safe evening. Good night, everyone.
Thank you very much, everybody.